Michael had nothing, no home, no family, no money. The streets had been his world for years, filled with rejection, cold nights, and empty stomachs. One evening, he reached into his pocket and handed over his last $5 to a struggling mother and her daughter. He expected nothing in return. What happened the next day would shake his world to its core. A black luxury car stopped beside him. A well-dressed man stepped out, holding an envelope. "Someone you helped wanted you to have this." Inside, Michael found a letter and a check for $50,000. Wind howled through the alleyways as Michael pulled his tattered coat tighter around his frail frame. The chill of the pavement seeped into his bones, a familiar discomfort that had become his reality. The city moved around him, shiny cars rolling past, pedestrians rushing to their destinations, neon lights flickering over storefronts filled with warmth and laughter. None of it included him. Michael had not always been homeless. There was a time when he had a job, a place to call home, and dreams of a future. But life had a cruel way of turning stability into survival. A string of misfortunes, losing his job, medical bills piling up, an eviction notice, had left him on the streets. Society had looked at him differently ever since. People saw him, but never really saw him. They walked past, avoiding eye contact, treating him as part of the city's background rather than a person who once had a life just like theirs. His stomach ached with hunger. His last meal had been more than a day ago. The only thing he had left was a crumpled $5 bill in his pocket. He had held on to it, unsure whether to spend it on food or save it for an emergency. But soon, that choice would not be his to make. Just across the street, a young mother walked into a diner, her little daughter's tiny hand clutched in hers. The way the woman hesitated at the counter caught Michael's attention. Something was wrong, and in that moment, everything changed. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon drifted from the diner, wrapping around Michael like an unspoken temptation. Inside, the mother pulled out her wallet, her hands shaking as she counted the bills and coins. A soft frown creased her forehead. The little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Can we get pancakes, Mommy?" Her mother sighed, her voice careful. "Let me see if we have enough." Michael had heard that tone before, the cautious hope of a parent trying not to disappoint their child. The cashier's polite but tired expression suggested she had seen this situation many times before. The mother recounted the money, pausing for a second longer than expected. Michael noticed her hesitation. She was short. Her daughter, too young to understand the depth of financial struggle, gave her mother a hopeful smile. "It is okay, Mommy. We can eat later." Michael's fingers tightened around the $5 bill in his pocket. A battle waged in his mind. That money could buy him food, something warm after days of scraping by on scraps. But that little girl was willing to go hungry just so her mother would not feel guilty. Michael exhaled slowly and stood up. His legs, stiff from sitting on cold concrete for hours, ached as he walked toward the counter. He placed the bill on the counter before the woman could say anything. "Let her have whatever she wants," he said softly. The mother turned, disbelief written across her face. "I cannot take this from you." Michael shook his head with a small smile. "You need it more." The cashier hesitated, then rang up the order. The little girl beamed up at him. "Thank you, mister." Michael nodded, then quietly walked out, the cold air biting at his skin. His stomach remained empty, but for the first time in years, his heart felt full. Little did he know, by sunrise, his world would turn upside down. As dawn stretched across the city skyline, Michael stirred from his uncomfortable slumber. His bones ached from the hard pavement, but something unusual caught his attention. A black luxury car slowed to a stop in front of him. Its polished surface reflected the morning sun, a stark contrast to the dull, gray street. A well-dressed man stepped out, his gaze scanning the area before settling on Michael. "Are you the man who gave $5 to a woman at the diner last night?" Michael blinked, struggling to process the question. "Yes. What?" The man extended a white envelope toward him. "She wanted you to have this." Michael's hands trembled as he carefully unfolded the letter inside. "You gave your last $5 to a stranger without expecting anything in return. But you did not know who I was. I was once in your position, hungry, hopeless, invisible to the world. Someone gave me a second chance, and now it is my turn to do the same for you." A piece of paper slipped from the envelope, a check for $50,000. His breath hitched. The numbers blurred as tears welled in his eyes. Doubt clawed at him. Was this real? His hands trembled as he turned the check over, running his fingers across the signature. A lump formed in his throat. No one had looked at him as more than a burden in years. Now, someone believed he was worth saving. The idea of change terrified him. He had spent so long surviving that he had forgotten what living felt like. For the first time in years, hope stirred within him. Here is the continuation and completion of the full 4,000-word story, ensuring a compelling emotional journey and a satisfying resolution. Michael sat on a worn-out bench, staring at the check in his hands. The city moved around him, oblivious to the storm of emotions raging inside. He had spent years convinced that his life was beyond saving, yet here he was, holding an opportunity that most people could only dream of. Doubt whispered in his mind. Would this really change anything? Could he break free from the cycle of survival he had known for so long? Shaking off the fear, he stood and walked toward the nearest store. His reflection in the glass startled him. His hair was matted, his clothes torn, his skin weathered from years under the open sky. He barely recognized himself. With hesitant steps, he stepped inside and bought a set of clean clothes. In the small restroom at the back, he washed his face, combed his hair, and changed into fresh clothes. As he looked in the mirror again, a different man stared back. For the first time in years, he saw someone with potential. Someone who could start over. With renewed determination, he made his way toward the address listed in the letter. The building before him stood tall, sleek, and modern. The glass doors reflected his uncertain expression. A deep breath steadied his nerves before he stepped inside. A receptionist greeted him with a warm smile. "You must be Michael. She is expecting you." His heart pounded as he was led to a spacious office. Seated behind the desk was the woman from the diner. The same woman whose daughter he had unknowingly helped. She stood up, her eyes filled with warmth. "Michael, I have been waiting to meet you." He swallowed, his voice hoarse. "Why would you do this for me?" She gestured for him to sit. "Because kindness is never forgotten. I was once homeless too. Someone took a chance on me, and I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would do the same for someone else. That someone was you." Tears welled in Michael's eyes. "I do not know how to thank you." She smiled. "I do not want thanks. I want you to believe in yourself. And, if you're willing, I have a job offer for you. A job. A real chance to rebuild." For the first time in years, Michael felt like he had a future. Months passed, and Michael's life transformed. The streets were no longer his home. His days were filled with purpose, working for the very organization that had changed his life. One evening, as he walked through the city, he noticed a man sitting on the same bench he had once called home. His shoulders slumped, his face hidden behind unkempt hair. Michael recognized the look of silent despair. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a few bills, and stepped closer. The man barely looked up as Michael placed the money in his hand. "Just promise me one thing," Michael said softly. The man lifted his head, his eyes searching. "What?" Michael smiled, his voice steady. "Never give up." As he walked away, a wave of emotions washed over him. Someone had once given him a chance when he thought all hope was lost. Now, he had done the same for someone else. One act of kindness had changed his life. And now, it would change another. Kindness is never wasted. A single act can ripple through time, changing lives in ways we may never fully understand. Always choose compassion. You never know when it might come back to you.